Okay, so here's something a little strange. At some point today, you are going to get up, walk out of one room, and head into another one, and somewhere along that 6 foot walk, an entire thought is going to vanish. Not fade, not get fuzzy around the edges. Vanish completely, like it was never there. One second, you know exactly why you're heading to the kitchen. The next second, you're standing in the kitchen, staring at the counter, genuinely unsure why you're even in this room. And here's the part that should stop you. It's not that your memory is bad, or that you're distracted, or tired, or losing it. Turns out, your brain is doing this to you on purpose every single time, and the trigger isn't the walk, it's the door. So here's what we're actually going to do. We're going to find out why a doorway, of all things, has this kind of power over your head. And by the end, you're going to understand something about how your brain organizes your entire life that you've probably never once thought about. Stay with me, because this one's stranger than it looks. Were you even aware? Let's just start with the obvious part, because it's worth actually sitting with it. This isn't rare. This isn't a some people thing. Basically, everyone just does this constantly without noticing they're doing it. You get up from the couch to grab your phone charger, right? You walk into the bedroom, you stand there. Nothing. You get up mid-conversation to go check something in another room, and by the time you arrive, the thing you were checking has quietly slipped out of your head, like it was never there at all. Some people even joke about it. They'll walk back to the couch, sit down in the exact same spot, and the thought comes flooding back the second they do. And it's not just phone chargers and Wi-Fi passwords either. This happens with actual sentences mid-conversation. You get up to grab something to back up a point you were making, and by the time you're standing in the next room, the point itself has quietly checked out along with you, which is, if you really think about it, incredibly weird. The information genuinely didn't disappear. It came back. It was just unreachable for a minute, like it got filed somewhere your brain temporarily couldn't get to. And here's the thing. We've all been trained to read this as a personal failure, a senior moment, a sign your attention span is garbage, or your memory's slipping, or you're just getting older. So look, the first question worth asking is simple. Were you even actually forgetting, in the normal sense of that word? Or was something else going on entirely? Reframe. It's not what you think turns out, it's the second one. And this is where the whole thing flips. Forgetting why you walked into a room isn't your memory glitching, and it isn't a bug in the system either. It's your brain running a background process that's been there the entire time, quietly filing and refiling your experience into separate chunks, and the doorway just happens to be the moment it decides to hit save on one chunk and open a new one. Psychologists actually have a name for this. They call it an event boundary. The idea is that your brain doesn't just experience your day as one long, unbroken stream. It chops it into episodes, almost like scenes in a film. Brushing your teeth is one scene, the drive to work is another, the meeting is another, and each scene gets its own little bundle of context. What you were doing, what you were holding, what mattered right then. When a scene ends, your brain closes that bundle and starts building a new one for whatever's next. And a doorway, as it happens, is one of the clearest scene change cues there is. Cleaner, even, than a change in lighting or a shift in background noise. A physical threshold, a wall you have to pass through, is about as unambiguous as a scene change gets, which is probably exactly why your brain leans on it so heavily. So let's actually look at where this comes from, because there's real research behind it, not just a theory someone made up over coffee. Back in 2011, a psychology professor at the University of Notre Dame named Gabriel Radvansky ran a set of experiments built around exactly this question, and the setup was almost embarrassingly simple once you hear it. In the first one, people sat at a computer navigating a virtual environment, walking up to a table, picking up an object, carrying it, and setting it down somewhere else. Sometimes they carried the object across a room, sometimes they carried it the exact same distance, but through a doorway into a new room. Then at random moments, they'd get a quiz. What are you currently carrying? So here's the result. It wasn't the walking that mattered. It was the door. People who crossed through a doorway were slower and less accurate, remembering what they had, compared to people who walked the identical distance but stayed in the same room. In some versions of the experiment, people were roughly 2 to 3 times more likely to forget what they were holding onto after crossing a threshold than after covering the exact same ground within one room, 2 to 3 times for walking through a door. And when Radvansky's team took this out of the computer and into an actual physical lab, real people, real boxes, real tables, the exact same thing happened. The doorway diminished the memory, every time. His explanation, and this is really the part that genuinely reframes the whole thing, is that a doorway isn't just a doorway to your brain. It's a boundary between two event models. Crossing it signals. That episode is over, archive it, open a new one. The information you needed in the last room gets treated as less urgent, filed away, because as far as your brain's concerned, you've changed venues, and venues call for fresh context. Think of your working memory less like a single desk with everything laid out on it, and more like a filing cabinet with a very efficient, slightly ruthless assistant inside. The assistant isn't trying to sabotage you. It's trying to keep your desk clear so you can actually think about the room you're in right now, one clean desk at a time, instead of every room you've ever stood in piled on top of each other. But that assistant has one habit you never agreed to. Every time you walk through a door, it assumes the last folder is done, and it closes it, sometimes a half second before you actually needed what was inside. Mechanism beat 2, you don't even need a real door. And this next part is genuinely strange, because you'd assume this only happens with an actual physical doorway, an actual threshold your body crosses. It doesn't. So a few years after Radvansky's original study, researchers at Knox College ran a version of this experiment where nobody actually walked anywhere. Participants sat still. They were shown an object to remember, then asked to simply imagine walking through a doorway in their mind, no movement, no real room, just picturing it, and the forgetting still showed up. People who imagined crossing a threshold were still worse at recalling the object than people who imagined walking the same mental distance without a doorway involved, which is honestly a little insulting when you think about it. Your brain doesn't even need the doorway. It just needs the idea of one. So sit with that for a second, because it's a stronger claim than it first sounds. It basically means the assistant filing your folders isn't reacting to hinges or wood or the physical sensation of stepping over a threshold. It's reacting to a concept. It hears new scene starting the same way, whether that scene change is real or something you only pictured, and it files accordingly. No questions asked, no verification required. Your brain basically trusts its own imagination enough to act on it. That tells you something important. This effect was never really about doors or hinges or wood or the physical act of stepping over a threshold. It's about how your brain organizes experience into episodes in the first place, and a doorway is just an unusually obvious, unusually reliable trigger for episode over, start a new one. Your brain would probably do some version of this at any clear boundary: a phone call ending, a task getting interrupted, a scene change in your own head. The door just makes it visible enough that you actually notice yourself losing something. But wait, is it really the boundary, or just the distraction? Now, a fair question here, and researchers asked it too. Maybe it's not the door itself. Maybe walking through a doorway is just more distracting than walking across a room, more visual information, a new space to process, new furniture to register, and that distraction is what bumps the thought out of your head. Nothing mystical about event boundaries required. That's a fair possibility. And look, to their credit, the researchers actually tested it directly, comparing distance traveled, environment complexity, even how immersive the virtual space was, and the forgetting kept tracking the boundary, not the distraction. Same distance, same visual complexity, more forgetting specifically at the doorway. So it's not simply new room, more to look at. It's something closer to a deliberate act of filing, your brain treating the crossing itself as the signal to update, which genuinely is a stranger conclusion than the distraction explanation would have been. A distracted brain losing a thought makes intuitive sense. Too much coming in, something falls out. A brain that actively decides to archive a thought the second you cross a threshold, on purpose, every time, closer to a filing decision than an accident, is a different kind of unsettling. It means the forgetting isn't just a side effect of your attention being pulled away, it's closer to a decision your brain made on your behalf. The twist: the same mechanism can also help you now for the part that's more interesting and more recent. For years, the doorway effect got talked about purely as a flaw, a little tax your brain charges you every time you change rooms. But a study out of Radvansky's own lab, published at the start of this year, found something that complicates that story. It turns out event boundaries don't just erase things. Sometimes they do the opposite. Information you happen to encounter right around the boundary itself, right as the old episode is closing and the new one is opening, can actually get remembered more clearly than information from the middle of an episode. Basically, your brain pays extra attention right at the seam. So the doorway effect isn't a simple design flaw. It's a side effect of a system that's mostly doing you a favor. Your brain can't hold every detail of every room you've ever stood in, active and ready at all times. That would be exhausting and honestly useless. So it archives what's no longer relevant and keeps its attention sharp, right at the moments things are changing, because those moments, evolutionarily speaking, are usually the ones that matter most. A predator at the edge of the clearing, a stranger at the entrance to camp. The instant something shifts is exactly when your ancestors needed sharp attention, not the middle of a familiar, unchanging scene. You just happen to notice the cost of that system on a random Tuesday when you walk into the kitchen for absolutely no reason you can currently recall. Why it hits some people harder now, not everyone just loses the thought at the same rate, and that variation is worth a second, because it tells you something about how the whole system actually works. The people who get hit hardest tend to be the ones already just running two things at once. You're on the phone while you walk to the fridge, or you're half watching something while you go grab a charger, and in those moments your working memory is already juggling more than one folder before you even reach the door. Add a boundary crossing on top of that, and there's simply less room left over to protect the original thought. And stress does something similar. When you're rushed or anxious, your attention narrows onto whatever feels most urgent right now, which is very often not the thing you originally got up for. There's also an age angle here, and it's a little more nuanced than your memory gets worse as you get older. Some research suggests that older adults are somewhat more susceptible to the doorway effect specifically, not because their memory is broadly failing, but because the effort of updating context after a boundary competes more directly with holding on to the original goal. Basically, the filing system still works. It just costs a little more to run. And here's the part that's honestly a little comforting. This isn't a character flaw, and it isn't unique to you. Genuinely, it happens to sharp, organized, on top of things people constantly. The professor who studies this admits it happens to him too. It's not a measure of how good your brain is. It's a measure of how many folders it's currently holding open and how many boundaries you've made it cross while holding them. Think about that the next time you catch yourself standing in a hallway feeling vaguely embarrassed. You're not slipping, you're just caught mid-filing. So what does this mean for you? So which brings us to the useful part, because knowing why this happens is one thing, but there's a genuinely practical takeaway buried in here. If the trigger is the boundary itself and not your memory being weak, then the fix isn't try harder to remember. The fix is making the thought survive the crossing in the first place. Researchers studying this suggest forming a specific, concrete intention before you cross the threshold, not a vague sense of I need something, but an actual sentence in your head. I am going to the bedroom for my phone charger. The more specific the intention, the more likely it survives the filing process, because you've basically labeled the folder before your brain has a chance to file it away half-finished. And saying it out loud actually works even better. Apparently, your own voice is a stronger label than a thought alone. And if that fails, and it will because you're human, there's the old trick everyone already half knows. Go back to the room where the thought started. Stand roughly where you were standing. It isn't that the room is magic or that the couch cushion holds some special power. It's that you're stepping back into the same event model, the same episode your brain filed the thought under, cueing it with the same context it was originally attached to. Reopen the folder, and there's a decent chance the thought is sitting right there where you left it, which is honestly kind of comforting in a weird way. The thought was never destroyed the way a lost set of keys is lost. It was just sitting under a heading you'd already walked away from. And this is where it stops being a fun fact about doorways and starts being something a little bigger. Because if your brain is constantly, invisibly chopping your entire day into separate little folders, sealing each one the moment you cross into the next scene, then the version of today you'll remember tonight isn't the raw footage of everything that happened. It's a stack of folders, some kept, some already quietly closed and half forgotten, filed the second you walk through a door, without asking your permission first. You're not just experiencing one continuous day. You're experiencing a series of rooms, and your brain is closing the door behind you on each one, whether you're ready or not. Which means the version of today you'll describe tonight, at dinner, to someone who asks how your day was never the whole day to begin with. It was whatever survived the doorways. So tonight, when you get up off the couch for something, and you find yourself standing in a doorway with absolutely no idea why, that's not you falling apart. That's a filing system built over millions of years, doing exactly what it was built to do, just a half second faster than you'd like. Honestly, respect. It's a strange thing to admire, a system that quietly edits your own life without checking with you first, but it's kept every version of your species alive long enough to invent doors worth forgetting things in front of. Same alarm, same wiring. You just have a lot more doorways in your life than your ancestors ever did. Same world, different lens.